With the launching of the first space satellites by the Soviet Union and the United States, with centuries of dreaming and planning behind him, man has made definite contact with the outer space. Soon he will himself set forth into the celestial vastness to once again challenge the unknown. When that day comes, who among us will be the first? Who among us will be the first to confront the undefined terrors along this infinite highway between the worlds? Us will be willing to confront the unknown is not new in the world. It has been asked and answered since man first began to investigate the earth upon which he dwells. Once man had explored most of the accessible parts of the globe, the question was answered by those who had to fight their way to the very ends of the earth, who pitted themselves against its vast desolation. Of all the explorers in history, none showed more courage and dedication than the explorers of the Earth's polar regions. To most of the world's population, the poles of the Earth were as remote and inaccessible half a century ago as are the farthest stars to us today. But in 1909, who cared about the North Pole? In that year, Americans began to get acquainted with the automobile. And men like Barney Oldfield are held in awe by a public that thinks, well, it just doesn't seem right for a man to go almost 60 miles an hour. It's a time when bathing beauties still saw fit to cover almost all their charms. But while many were set on pinning a tail on a donkey, one man had his mind on quite another objective. Robert Edwin Perry, close friend of President Teddy Roosevelt. After 23 years of heartbreaking failure, Perry, now in 1909, is trying once more to reach the North Pole. For this fearful task, his ship must withstand the crushing ice, his crew able to survive conditions which have defeated all others. Victory or defeat depend upon the stamina of his huskies. Perry dashes to the pole and makes it. Perry's words after the hazardous return to safety stand today as a prophecy fulfilled.
The future of polar exploration rests on the airplane.
In 1910, when Scott leaves New Zealand, he is confident that his is the most carefully planned expedition on record. Details include these historic films. But enthusiasm is dampened by the news that a Norwegian ship commanded by the Arctic veteran Roald Amundsen is also en route to the South Pole, changing this voyage of exploration into the most dramatic race in the history of all mankind. Almost from the beginning of his journey, Scott is in trouble. Tremendous storms slow him down. When at last they survive to enter the ice pack, the movement of the floes foretells more trouble. For 20 days, Scott's ship cuts and jams and twists her way until at last she stands off the great ice barrier of Antarctica. Each day of delay changing the odds against their reaching the pole first. Scott's ship, the Terra Nova, now lies alongside the ice of Ross Island. By mid-January, the hut for his base party is nearing completion. The same hut Americans will find years later. But now Scott knows that Amundsen has established a camp to the east, and the stage is set for the classic race to the South Pole. Amundsen's route is 60 miles shorter than the 900 miles Scott will cover. And if the Norwegian's expectations prove right, he and his 100 dogs will be able to travel faster than Scott with his ponies and tractors. In mid-October, Amundsen sets out into the unexplored wilderness. And 2 weeks later, the Englishman starts, determined to beat the Norwegians to the pole. Amundsen knows the value of his dogs. He is depending on their speed, their ruggedness, their light weight, which allows them to move over crevasses and rough ice without mishap. With animals as large as his ponies, Scott is forced to move more slowly. His tractors are broken down after a few days on the ice, and his dogs are held back by the slower pace of the others. And the only power left is manpower. The human-drawn sledge was part of the plan, but the plan originally did not include a race with Amundsen. Their burden is not lightened by the thought that Amundsen might already be at the pole. In his diary, Scott writes,
Only 51 miles from the pole tonight. If we don't get to it, we shall be damned close.
On the last leg of their torturous journey, they pull their heavy loads with light hearts. And on January the 16th comes the cruel blow. They reach the pole and find the tent and flag of the Norwegians. Amundsen has been there first, a whole month before. Wrote Scott,
The pole, yes, but under very different circumstances from those we expected. Great God, this is an awful place. Terrible for us to have labored to it without reward or priority. Now for the run home, and a desperate struggle. 800 miles of solid dragging. I wonder if we can make it.
Evans, the first member of the party, succumbs to the freezing cold and shattering wind, martyr to a lost cause. Behind schedule now. Can those left save themselves? Despite the crushing hardships, they managed to reach a point only 11 miles from the main supply depot. Scott wrote,
No food for a week now. Every day we have been ready to start for our depot, but outside the door it remains a scene of whirling drift. I do not think we can hope for any better things now. We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weaker, of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more.
These are the final words that Scott wrote in his diary. In 1903, the Wright brothers give promise of things to come. but their early creations are still far too fragile to challenge the Earth's extremities. But pioneers like Wilhelm Stephenson cannot wait for the airplane to reach maturity. In 1912, he believes the Arctic can be conquered by building a camp on a solid ice floe and drift with the ice across the Arctic Ocean. Stephenson proves that the white man can best live in the Arctic by following the ways of the Eskimo, getting fuel from the fat, food from the flesh, and clothes from the skins of land and sea animals. A decade after the Wright brothers proved their invention, Stephenson leads a scientific expedition in the first successful mass penetration of the Arctic. Here he explores and maps over 100,000 square miles of uncharted polar territory. But while the scientific work progresses, one of the 3 ships belonging to his party becomes locked in the ice. Captain Bob Bartlett must give the order to abandon ship. Minutes later, the Karluk has disappeared forever in the waters beneath the ice. 4 months later, news of the missing Karluk's captain is published in Nome's Daily Nugget. Immediately, the crew of a small trading schooner volunteers to make an heroic 600-mile rescue effort against overwhelming odds. Soon the courageous little ship, King and Wing, runs into ice so densely packed that she must twist and turn and even ride up onto the floes, cracking a path through the ice with her own weight. But the ship cannot take such handling long. The torturing ice smashes her propeller. All hands turn to in the sub-zero cold to repair the damage. Delay, they know, may cost the Karluk's survivors their lives, perhaps even their own. Again, the schooner moves northward, as fast as the ice allows. The 8-month ordeal of the Karluk's crew is over when the ship arrives at Wrangell's Island. And just in time, for the polar seas are breaking up. But the price paid for this adventurous expedition is high. Less than half of all who set out survive. That any lived is a testament to the hardiness of the explorers and to the courage of the rescue crew. Crippled and exhausted, the survivors must call upon their last reserves of strength to cover the remaining steps to the rescue ship. They prove once more Stephenson's theory of Arctic survival. As early as 1922, the first efforts were made to best the Arctic with aircraft. At last, explorers hoped they would travel above the murderous ice. Roald Amundsen spearheads this first air assault. In some of the tests to which his 2 planes are put, the results are uncertain. But despite the failure of the expedition, the courteous aircraft eventually proved their worth. Amundsen returns to his home in Norway, a dissatisfied man beset by debt. But now he's determined to fly to the North Pole. To New York, Amundsen comes in 1924 with his 2 adopted Eskimo children. Here he seeks money to help realize his dream of flying to the pole. But in 1924, Americans have thoughts only for what they consider more important things. The recent enactment of the 18th Amendment causes tears and spirits to flow freely. Red Grange, the galloping ghost, is an all-American topic. And another Scandinavian visitor creates great popular interest. Sonja Hene. But one American has caught Amundsen's spirit. Lincoln Ellsworth puts up $85,000 for 2 flying boats. They are unloaded in northern Greenland for man's first attempted flight to the pole. In spite of sub-zero temperatures and biting winds, the assembly of the 2 planes proceeds rapidly. At last, weather, machines, and men are in tune for the assault. Amundsen with Reel1 and Vogt in the N-25. Ellsworth with Dietrichson and Umdahl will fly the N-24. In the early morning hours, the overloaded planes groan sluggishly over the ice, straining to lift the men and supplies. The end of the runway approaches, and the airplane starts its first flight for a look at the North Pole. The top of the world is seen as never before by man. As the N-25 roars over the ice, Amundsen thought,
How many misfortunes have you been responsible for over the years? You vast whiteness. Perry brought you to your knees, but what have you done with those who sought to free themselves from your embrace in vain? But something is wrong. Is it my time to know now?
Amundsen and his 2 companions in the N-25 are still alive, but half their fuel supply is exhausted. Their plane, partially wrecked. The readings show they are a little more than 100 miles from the pole. But with a dead airplane in this sea of ice, is there any hope for survival? And what of Ellsworth and his companions? Can they be counted on for any help? The Amundsen party roams the frozen wastes. Suddenly, a miracle. Flags. Flags. Wigwagging the message that Ellsworth's team is also crashed on the ice. But now, how are they to join forces? The treacherous new ice is constantly shifting. Ellsworth will try in his canvas canoe. His diary tells the story of the hazardous journey. We are well aware of the chances we are taking, crossing this new ice, but we see no other alternative. We must get over to the N25 with all possible speed if we are ever to get back again to civilization. The only hope of the reunited men lies along the route to northern Greenland. With shrinking food supplies, it would be impossible to make the trip on foot, even if the ice would hold them. Their only chance lies with the crippled N25. Time and again, man-towed sleds shuttle back and forth across the heaving ice. But to take off, you need a runway. Now begins one of the most amazing feats of disciplined persistence in the history of adventure. The 6 men slash and hack and pick at the jagged ridges of ice. A desolate waste must be converted into the runway for the takeoff. It must be smooth and at least a 1/4 of a mile long. Their tools for this monumental job: a scout's axe, a large shovel, small shovel, a bayonet, and 3 sheath knives. But failure can mean only one thing: certain death. In the eyes of the outside world, they're already dead. But rescue ships continue their fruitless searches. At last, even they abandon hope. The Amundsen Ellsworth expedition is scratched from the book. A week passes, then another. Work done yesterday must be redone today. Sleepless, sick, exhausted, they continue. Each man lives on 300 grams of food a day. Less than Perry fed his dogs on his journey to the pole. Day after day after day, picking, hacking. Another foot, another yard. At last, their grim task nears completion. A 1/4 mile of ice has been leveled. But on either side of the runway, the ice is beginning to break up. Before their horrified eyes, they see their only avenue of escape disintegrating. The last gear is stowed aboard the plane. Time is running out. The fateful moment is at hand. Will they make it? The throttle is opened wide. N25 sags, brushes the ice of a big floe. Then suddenly, she's in the air! The Arctic has lost its first real battle to the airplane. But to the very end, the flying pioneers have death beside them. Controls jammed, and the pilot puts down the plane 2 hours from home off the coast of Greenland. With the arrival of the rescue ship, a new chapter is added to the annals of polar history. They have cheated the Arctic and are alive to challenge the unknown another time. the intrepid six, Reel1, Leif Dickerson, Oscar Umdahl, Karl Vogt. But these gaunt faces of Lincoln Ellsworth and Roald Amundsen make little impression on the world whose attention is focused on the monkey trial at Dayton, Tennessee. John T. Scopes, a high school teacher, is defended by lawyer Clarence Darrow. Aiding the prosecution, William Jennings Bryan. And in 1925, it's smart to wear the new lipstick or be shocked at the sight of a woman smoking in public.